General Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the ESS Defiant, watching Saturn's rings glow red with fire. Hundreds of human ships were dying out there. She could see the explosions on her screen, each one representing hundreds of lives snuffed out in seconds. The Kethrin fleet was too strong, too advanced, too many. "General, we need to fall back," her tactical officer said. His voice shook. "We've lost 70% of the fleet." Sarah knew he was right. This battle was over. The war was over. Earth had lost. "All ships, retreat to Earth," she ordered. Her throat felt tight. Maximum speed. The Kethrins had come from the other side of the galaxy 3 years ago. They led something called the Imperium, a group of hundreds of alien species that ruled most of the known stars. They said humanity was too violent, too dangerous to be allowed freedom. They said Earth needed to be controlled. Humanity had fought back, but the Kethrins had been conquering worlds for thousands of years. They knew war better than humans knew breathing. Now, as the Defiant limped back toward Earth, Sarah could see her homeworld on the view screen. Parts of it were burning. The Kethrins had already begun their bombardment. New York was gone. Tokyo was gone. Half of Europe was on fire. Her communications officer looked up with tears in his eyes. "General, we're receiving a transmission from the United Earth Council. They want to speak with you." Sarah knew what they were going to say. She had known this moment would come. The face of Council President Martinez appeared on her screen. He looked like he had aged 20 years in the last 3 days. "General Chen, the Council has voted. We must surrender. We have no choice." "What are their terms?" Sarah asked, even though she already feared the answer. "Complete disarmament, total occupation, and—" Martinez paused, his voice breaking. "They want all 17 members of the Emergency Command Council. You and the other generals. They want to try you for war crimes." Sarah felt ice in her stomach. The Emergency Command Council was the top military leadership of Earth. 17 generals who had led the defense of humanity. The Kethrins wanted them all. "It's a show trial," Sarah said quietly. "They're going to execute us." "I know," Martinez said. "But if we refuse, they'll burn every city on Earth. They'll kill billions. Sarah, I'm sorry. We have no other choice." Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew, young men and women who had fought so bravely, who had lost friends and family, who had given everything for Earth. "I understand, Mr. President," she said. "Tell the Kethrins we accept their terms." 2 days later, Sarah stood in chains aboard a Kethrin warship. Around her were the other 16 generals, all bound like criminals. They were being transported to Geneva, where the trial would take place. Through the viewport, Sarah could see Kethrin ships everywhere. Huge vessels that looked like they were made of crystal and metal. They surrounded Earth like vultures around a dying animal. Landing craft descended constantly, carrying occupation troops to the surface. General Marcus Webb stood beside her. He had commanded the defense of Mars before it fell. "Did you do it?" he whispered. "Yes," Sarah whispered back. "Before they arrested me, I authenticated my biometric signature." "Me too," Marcus said. "How many of us knew?" "Only the 17 of us," Sarah said. "Only the Command Council. That was the rule." On her other side, General Park Min-jun spoke softly. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Sarah watched a Kethrin ship fire on a human settlement that had refused to surrender. The entire area turned to glass in seconds. "They're gonna kill us anyway," she said. "At least this way, humanity survives. Changed maybe, broken maybe, but alive." "And they get what they deserve," Marcus added, grimly. A Kethrin guard approached, tall and covered in blue scales. He looked at the humans with obvious disgust. "You primitives are lucky the war marshal is merciful. On other worlds, we simply exterminate the natives." Sarah said nothing. She had learned that arguing with the Kethrins was pointless. They saw humans as insects, barely worth talking to. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. James Morrison sat in a secret facility that most of Earth's government didn't even know existed. His screen showed a message that made his hands shake. Protocol 0, Authentication 1 of 17 received. He stared at it for a long time. General Chen had authenticated. That meant she had accepted what was going to happen. Morrison had helped design Protocol 0 15 years ago, when humanity first made contact with aliens and realized how dangerous the galaxy was. It was meant to be a last resort, a doomsday option that would only trigger under one specific condition. All 17 members of the Emergency Command Council had to die while in enemy custody. It was designed that way on purpose. If all 17 generals were captured and executed, it meant Earth had truly fallen. It meant there was no hope of conventional victory. And it meant the aliens had pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. Morrison brought up the technical specifications, the quantum manipulators hidden throughout the solar system, the calculations programmed into Earth's sun, the delivery vectors that had been mapped years in advance. His assistant, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, entered the room. "James, is it really happening?" "Chen authenticated," Morrison said. "If the others do too, and if they're all executed, yes, it will happen. Can we stop it?" Morrison shook his head. "That's the point. Once all 17 authenticate and then die, the protocol activates automatically. No one can stop it. Not us, not the president, not anyone." "Good," Yuki said harshly. She had lost her entire family when Beijing burned. "Let them burn like they burned us." Morrison didn't answer. He just watched the screen, waiting for more authentication confirmations to arrive. Back on the Kethrin ship, Sarah stood at the viewport with the other generals. Earth was getting smaller behind them as they traveled to Geneva. "Do you think it will work?" General Amanda Foster asked quietly. She had commanded the lunar defense platforms. "It has to," Sarah said. "We designed it to work. We tested every component." "We never tested it all together," Marcus pointed out. "We couldn't," Sarah said. "Testing it would have meant using it." General Park looked at the stars. "My daughter is down there. She's only 6 years old." "They'll survive," Sarah promised, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. The protocol was designed to protect Earth. Everything else, she didn't finish. "Everything else burns," Marcus finished for her. The Kethrin Guard returned. "War Marshal Thexnor wants to see you, the human who thinks she's a general." Sarah followed him through the ship. She was taken to a massive command chamber, where War Marshal Thexnor waited. He was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, with silver scales and cold yellow eyes. "General Chen," he said in perfect English, "do you know how many species have fought the Imperium?" "No," Sarah said. "Do you know how many have won?" Sarah said nothing. "None," Thexnor continued. "Your species is young and foolish. You think you are special. You are not. In a few generations, humans will forget they were ever independent. They will serve the Imperium, and they will be grateful for it." Sarah met his eyes. "You shouldn't have come here." Thexnor laughed. It sounded like breaking glass. "Is that a threat? From a defeated general in chains?" "It's a fact," Sarah said calmly. "You made a mistake." "The only mistake was yours," Thexnor said. "Now you will pay for it. All of you will pay." He dismissed her with a wave. As Sarah was led back to the holding cell, she whispered to herself, "No, you'll pay. All of you." She didn't know if it would work. She didn't know if Protocol 0 would activate properly. But she knew one thing for certain. The Kethrins had won the battle. But they had made one fatal error. They had underestimated human spite. Geneva had once been a beautiful city. Sarah remembered visiting it years ago, before the war, when it was full of parks and museums and peaceful people. Now it was occupied territory. Catherine banners hung from every building. Alien soldiers patrolled the streets. The Palace of Nations had been converted into a courtroom. Not for justice, Sarah knew, for spectacle. She and the other 16 generals were brought in through a back entrance, still in chains. The main hall had been filled with seats, and those seats were filled with aliens. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Representatives from every species in the Imperium had come to watch. As the humans were marched onto the stage, the aliens began to laugh and jeer. Sarah heard their voices mixing together in dozens of languages, but the meaning was clear. They thought this was funny. They thought humanity's defeat was entertainment. "Look at them," one alien called out in translated speech. "They're so small." "Did these really think they could fight the Imperium?" another asked, provoking more laughter. The 17 generals were forced to stand in a line on the stage. Behind them, 17 nooses hung from a metal frame. The Kethrans had studied human execution methods. They wanted this to be symbolic. War Marshal Thexanor stood at a podium, looking out at the crowd. He raised his arms for silence, and the laughter slowly died down. "Today we witness the inevitable fate of all who defy the Imperium," he began. His voice boomed through speakers. "These humans started a war they could not win. They refused to join galactic civilization peacefully. They chose violence." Sarah wanted to scream that it was a lie. The Kethrans had demanded Earth's surrender from the first moment of contact. They had never offered peace, only submission. Nothing she said would matter now. "Let this be a lesson to all species," Thexanor continued. "The Imperium brings order. The Imperium brings peace. Those who resist will face justice." He turned to look at the 17 humans. "You have been found guilty of crimes against galactic civilization. The sentence is death." He turned to look at the 17 humans. "You have been found guilty of crimes against galactic civilization. The sentence is death." The crowd erupted in cheers. Sarah felt sick. The executioner, a tall Kethran in ceremonial armor, approached General Torres first. He had commanded Earth's space navy. He was 70 years old and had lost 2 sons in the war. They put the noose around his neck. Torres looked straight ahead, not giving them the satisfaction of seeing fear. The executioner pulled the lever. It was quick. Too quick, Sarah thought. Torres deserved better than this. The aliens cheered louder. Many of them were recording this on their devices. This would be broadcast across the galaxy as proof of the Imperium's power. One by one, the generals were executed. General Park Min-jun, who had 3 daughters waiting on Earth. General Foster, who had been a teacher before joining the military. General Webb, who had saved thousands of civilians during the evacuation of Mars. Each time, the crowd celebrated. They applauded. They laughed. A Kethran dignitary near the front stood up and shouted, "This is what happens to primitives who forget their place." Another alien responded, "They fought with such passion, though, almost admirable, in a foolish sort of way." "Passion means nothing against superior technology," a third alien said, and they all agreed with clicking sounds and gestures of approval. Sarah watched her friends die, one after another. She kept her face neutral, but inside she was counting. Each death was another authentication. Each death was another key turning in the lock of Protocol Zero. When 12 generals had been executed, a Kethran journalist approached Thexanor with a recording device. "War Marshal, what will happen to the human homeworld now?" Thexanor smiled, showing too many teeth. "Earth will become a resource colony. The humans will work for the Imperium. Their culture will be absorbed. Their technology will be studied and scrapped. In 50 years, human children will not even remember they were once independent." "And what of their military capabilities?" "Primitive," Thexanor said dismissively. "They had some clever tactics, yes. They were creative in their desperation, but they lacked discipline. They fought with emotion rather than logic. They never had a chance." The journalist seemed satisfied with that answer. Sarah filed it away in her memory. They thought humans were emotional and illogical. Good. Let them think that. Then, General Okoye. Then, General Nakamura. 15 generals had now died. Sarah and General Zong were the last two remaining. Zong had been her mentor when she first joined the military. He had taught her everything about strategy and leadership. As they put the noose around Zong's neck, he turned to look at Sarah. He gave her the smallest nod. He knew. He understood what was about to happen. The lever pulled. Zong died. 16 authentication codes now received. The crowd was in a frenzy now. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The execution of the Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces. Fexnor himself approached Sarah. General Chen, do you have any last words? Sarah looked out at the crowd of aliens. She saw their joy, their satisfaction, their absolute certainty that they had won. She thought about Dr. Morrison and his hidden facility. She thought about the quantum manipulators positioned throughout the solar system. She thought about the calculations that had taken years to perfect. You shouldn't have killed us all, Sarah said clearly. Fexnor laughed. Is that a curse? A threat? You have no power here, human. I'm not threatening you, Sarah said. I'm informing you. You needed to keep at least one of us alive. Why would we do that? Fexnor asked, still amused. Because dead men can't stop what's coming, Sarah said. Some of the aliens in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Sarah's tone was too calm, too certain. But Fexnor just shook his head. Brave words from a defeated enemy, he said. But words are all you have left. He gestured to the executioner. Finish it. They put the noose around Sarah's neck. The rough materials scratched her skin. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She thought about her sister, who lived in Australia. She hoped Protocol Zero would really protect Earth like they had designed it to. She hoped the calculations were correct. The executioner reached for the lever. Sarah took one last breath and said, "See you in hell." The lever pulled, the floor dropped. Sarah Chen, Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces, died. The crowd exploded with celebration. Aliens danced and cheered. They clinked their various drinking vessels together. They congratulated each other on the Imperium's great victory. Fexnor stood at the podium again, arms raised triumphantly. It is done. The human resistance is broken. Their leaders are dead. Earth belongs to the Imperium. The cheering grew even louder. A Kethran admiral stood up and proposed a toast. To the War Marshal, to the Imperium, to our inevitable victory over all primitive species. They all drank. They all celebrated. In a luxury suite overlooking the execution ground, several high-ranking Kethrans discussed how to divide up Earth's resources. They argued over who would get mining rights to which continents. They planned which human cities would be demolished and which would be converted into industrial zones. The humans did have some interesting art, one of them said. We should preserve some of it for museums, as a reminder of their folly. Agreed, another said. Future species will see it and understand the cost of defying us. Outside, in the ruins of Geneva, human civilians watched from a distance. They were not allowed near the Palace of Nations, but they could see the Kethran celebrations. They could hear the laughter. Many of them wept. Their protectors were dead. Their generals had been murdered like criminals. Earth was truly conquered now. But deep in the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Morrison stared at his screen, with tears running down his face. Protocol 0, Authentication 17 of 17, received. All Command Council members confirmed deceased. Activation sequence initiated. Countdown, 72 hours. Morrison had hoped it wouldn't come to this. He had prayed that somehow Earth would win, or that the Kethrans would show mercy, or that the generals would find another way. But now all 17 were dead. The final condition had been met. Protocol Zero was activating, and nothing in the universe could stop it. Dr. Tanaka entered the room and saw the screen. She saw Morrison's tears. "It's really happening," she whispered. "Yes," Morrison said. "God forgive us. It's really happening." Above Geneva, aboard his flagship, War Marshal Thexnor celebrated with his officers. They drank Catherine wine and shared stories of the war. They mocked the human tactics. They laughed about how quickly Earth had fallen. "The humans were so confident at first," one officer said. "They really believed they could win." "All primitives think that," Thexnor said, "until reality teaches them otherwise." "What do you think that human general meant?" another officer asked. "Chen, her last words about us needing to keep one alive." Thexnor waved dismissively. "Desperate nonsense. She was trying to frighten us. It didn't work." They all agreed and continued celebrating. After all, what could dead humans possibly do to them? In 72 hours, they would find out. 3 days passed. The Kethran occupation of Earth grew tighter with each hour. Their ships filled the skies above every major city. Their soldiers patrolled the streets, enforcing strict curfews and confiscating any human technology they deemed dangerous. In Shanghai, Kethran engineers began dismantling a fusion power plant. In London, they loaded art treasures onto transport ships. In Sao Paulo, they established processing centers where humans would be assigned work duties for the Imperium. War Marshal Thexnor moved his command center to Earth's orbit, aboard his massive flagship, the Eternal Judgment. From there, he coordinated the systematic stripping of humanity's homeworld. "The humans built more than we expected," his chief engineer reported. "Their infrastructure is primitive but extensive. It will take months to properly catalog everything." "We have time," Thexnor said. "They have nowhere to run, no one to help them. Take what we need and destroy the rest." On the bridge of the Eternal Judgment, a science officer monitoring deep space readings noticed something odd. She studied her instruments carefully, then approached her supervisor. "Sir, I'm detecting unusual quantum signatures from the human star." The supervisor barely looked up from his data pad. "Define unusual." "Fluctuations in the stellar magnetic field. Slight variations in fusion output. It's probably nothing, but the patterns are strange." "Stellar phenomena are often strange," the supervisor said dismissively. "Our star charts show Sol as a stable yellow dwarf, nothing to worry about." "Should I log it anyway?" "If you want to waste time on paperwork, yes. But I wouldn't bother the War Marshal with natural stellar activity." The science officer returned to her station, unconvinced but unwilling to push further. She noted the readings in her personal log and continued monitoring. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. James Morrison hadn't slept in 3 days. His facility was running on emergency power, completely cut off from the surface to avoid Kethran detection. He and his small team of scientists monitored Protocol Zero's activation sequence. The main screen showed a countdown: 14 hours, 23 minutes, 17 seconds. Dr. Tanaka sat beside him, reviewing the calculations for the 1,000th time. "The quantum manipulators are all responding correctly. The stellar compression fields are charging as designed." Morrison nodded, but he felt hollow inside. "How many people are going to die because of what we built?" "Billions of Kethrans," Tanaka said quietly. "Maybe trillions when you count all their colonies in the strike zone." "And we can't stop it?" "No," Tanaka said firmly. "That was the whole point, James. Once all 17 generals died, the protocol had to be unstoppable. Otherwise, the enemy could just force someone to deactivate it." Morrison stood and walked to a wall where photos hung. Pictures of the team that had built Protocol Zero, taken 15 years ago. They had been so young then, so full of hope that humanity would never need to use what they were creating. "Do you remember the debate?" Morrison asked. "When we were designing this?" "Which debate? We had hundreds." About whether we should build it at all, Morrison said. Half the team said it was too dangerous, that having this capability would make us no better than the monsters we feared. The other half said we needed insurance, Tanaka replied. That if humanity was going to survive in a hostile galaxy, we needed a weapon that would make aliens think twice before exterminating us. We were both right, Morrison said bitterly. The facility's communication system beeped. It was an automated message from the government's emergency broadcast system, routed through hardened underground cables the Kethrans hadn't found yet. Morrison opened it. President Martinez's face appeared, looking exhausted. Dr. Morrison, if you're receiving this, then the generals are dead and Protocol Zero is active. I want you to know that I tried to stop them. I begged the Kethrans to show mercy, to keep at least one general alive. They refused. They wanted to make an example of all 17. Martinez paused, struggling with his emotions. I know you'll be questioning whether this is right, whether we have the moral authority to do what we're about to do. I've been asking myself the same thing. But James, they're burning our cities, they're enslaving our people, they're erasing our culture. If we don't do this, humanity dies anyway. At least this way, we survive, and they learn. The message ended. Morrison saved it to the facility's archive. Future historians would need to understand why this happened. Another scientist, Dr. Patel, approached with a tablet. James, I'm getting readings from the surface. The Kethrans are establishing permanent settlements in 12 major cities. They're bringing in civilian populations from their core worlds. Morrison felt sick. Families? Yes, children even. They're that confident this is permanent. Tanaka looked away. They don't know. They have no idea what's coming. Should we warn them? Patel asked quietly. Morrison had thought about this question for 3 days straight. If we warn them, they'll force us to shut it down. They'll torture humans until they find this facility. And even if we wanted to deactivate Protocol Zero, we can't. The protocol specifically prevents deactivation once initiated. That doesn't answer the moral question, Patel pressed. No, Morrison admitted, it doesn't. We're going to kill billions of people who never voted for this war, who maybe never even knew Earth existed until their government sent them here. Children who have done nothing wrong. The Kethrans killed our children too, Tanaka said harshly. They burned entire cities. They didn't give us a choice. Two wrongs don't make a right, Patel said. No, Morrison agreed, but sometimes you have to choose between wrong and extinction. The countdown continued. 12 hours, 04 minutes, 55 seconds. On the surface, in what remained of Denver, a young woman named Maria Santos looked up at the Kethran ships filling the sky. She had lost her parents in the bombardment of Mexico City. She had lost her brother fighting in the Battle of Jupiter. She had nothing left but survival. A Kethran soldier approached her, speaking through a translation device. Human, report to Processing Center 7 for work assignment. Maria wanted to refuse. She wanted to fight, but she was unarmed, alone, and exhausted. She nodded and began walking toward the center. As she walked, she passed other humans, all with the same defeated look in their eyes. This was their life now. This was forever. Or so they thought. Back in the hidden facility, Morrison pulled up the technical specifications for Protocol Zero one more time. He needed to understand exactly what was about to happen. The quantum manipulators had been hidden throughout the solar system over the course of 12 years. They looked like ordinary satellites and space debris. Even if the Kethrans scanned them, they would see nothing unusual. The real technology was microscopic, quantum-entangled particles that could influence stellar processes. Those particles were now positioned in and around the sun, in a carefully calculated pattern. When activated, they would trigger an artificial stellar event. A directed coronal mass ejection. The sun would essentially become a gun, and that gun was pointed at every Kethran installation within 50 light-years of Earth. The calculations had taken years. Morrison's team had mapped probable invasion routes based on the positions of known Kethran colonies. They had predicted where an invasion fleet would likely gather, where occupation forces would establish bases, where supply lines would run. They had been terrifyingly accurate. The ejection will last for 17 seconds, Morrison said, reading the specifications aloud. 1 second for each general. The radiation and particle wave will travel at 98% of light speed. And it will hit the Kethran core worlds in 3 to 6 weeks, depending on distance, Tanaka added. Their colonies will be sterilized. Their fleets will be vaporized. Their infrastructure will be destroyed. What about Earth? Patel asked. The ejection is directional, Morrison explained. It's focused away from Earth. We'll experience some radiation increase, but nothing catastrophic. The magnetic field will protect us. And if your calculations are wrong? Morrison didn't answer. If the calculations were wrong, Earth would burn too. But they had tested every component, run every simulation. They had to trust the science. The countdown reached 10 hours. Aboard the Eternal Judgment, War Marshal Fexnor was reviewing reports when his science officer finally decided to inform him about the stellar readings. War Marshal, I apologize for the interruption, but the quantum fluctuations from Sol are increasing. I think you should see this. Fexnor studied the data with mild interest. Could this affect our operations? Unlikely, sir. It's just unusual. Stars don't normally show this kind of pattern. Define pattern. The fluctuations are rhythmic, almost artificial, but that's impossible. You can't manipulate a star. Fexnor felt a small prickle of unease. Humans are primitive, but they're clever. Have we done a complete scan of their solar system? Yes, sir. Multiple times. We found nothing unusual. Do it again, Fexnor ordered. And this time, look for anything that doesn't belong. Anything at all. The science officer hurried away. Fexnor returned to his reports, but the unease remained. General Chen's last words echoed in his mind. You shouldn't have killed us all. In the hidden facility, alarms began to sound. They're scanning, Tanaka reported. Deep scan. They're looking for something. Will they find us? Patel asked. Not us, Morrison said. We're too deep, too well shielded. But the quantum manipulators are designed to be undetectable, Tanaka finished. Even if they scan directly at one, they'll just see space debris. Unless they physically retrieve one and analyze it, Morrison said. They all looked at the countdown. 9 hours, 12 minutes, 03 seconds. They won't find them in time, Tanaka said. Even if they detected one now, they'd need hours to retrieve it, more hours to analyze it, and then they'd have to figure out what it does and how to stop it. Morrison hoped she was right. But hope was a fragile thing. On Earth's surface, Maria Santos reached Processing Center 7. Inside, Kethran officials were assigning humans to various work duties: mining, construction, agriculture, manufacturing. The remnants of humanity's civilization were being converted into an industrial machine for the Imperium. As Maria waited in line, she overheard 2 Kethran soldiers talking. I heard they executed all the human generals, one said. Good, they deserved it for resisting. My clutchmate says we should have kept one alive, as a hostage or something. What would be the point? The humans are beaten. They have no fight left. Maria listened and said nothing. But something in the way the soldier mentioned keeping one alive made her wonder. Why would that matter? What difference would one general make now? She didn't know it, but that small conversation contained the truth. The Kethrans had made one critical mistake. They had killed all 17. And now, nothing could stop what was coming. The sun changed. At first, it was subtle. A slight brightening that most people didn't notice. The Catherine science officer monitoring Sol saw her instrument suddenly spike with readings that made no sense. "War Marshal," she shouted across the bridge. "The star, it's doing something." Fexnor rushed to her station. "What do you mean, doing something? The magnetic field is collapsing in a specific region. The fusion rate is increasing exponentially in that same area." "Sir, this isn't natural. This can't be natural." On the screen, they watched as a visible disturbance appeared on the sun's surface. It looked like a bright spot, growing brighter by the second. "Is it a solar flare?" Fexnor demanded. "No, sir. It's too focused, too controlled. It's as if something is forcing the star to release energy in a specific direction." Fexnor felt ice in his blood. "What direction?" The science officer's hands shook as she calculated. "Toward, sir, toward all of our major installations, our fleet positions, our supply routes, our colonies." "That's impossible. You can't weaponize a star." "Tell that to the star, sir, because it's happening." Across the solar system, automated sensors detected the event. In Morrison's hidden facility, alarms changed from warning tones to activation confirmations. "The compression field has reached critical density," Tanaka reported, her voice tight. "The stellar material is being focused through the quantum channels. Protocol 0 is fully active." Morrison watched the main screen. It showed a simulation of what was happening inside the sun. Millions of quantum manipulators working in perfect synchronization, creating artificial magnetic fields that squeezed and directed the star's fusion energy like water through a hose. "Time to ejection?" he asked. 17 seconds, Tanaka said. "Starting now." The sun erupted. For exactly 17 seconds, Earth's star released a directed burst of energy and particles that violated every natural law of stellar mechanics. The coronal mass ejection shot outward from the sun at 98% of light speed, carrying enough radiation to sterilize planets. But this was not a natural ejection spreading in all directions. This was focused, aimed, weaponized. The quantum manipulators had created channels through space itself, pathways that the ejection followed like a bullet follows a barrel. The energy spread out along those channels, traveling toward predetermined coordinates calculated years in advance. On Earth, people saw the sun flash brighter for 17 seconds. Some thought it was beautiful. Most were too busy surviving the occupation to care. But on the eternal judgment, War Marshal Fexnor watched in horror as his instruments showed him the truth. "The ejection is following our supply routes," the science officer said in disbelief. "It's moving along the exact paths our ships use. How did they know? How could they possibly have known?" Fexnor's mind raced. The answer came to him with terrible clarity. They didn't know. They predicted. They mapped every logical route an invasion force would take, and they built this weapon to follow those routes. "How long ago?" "Years," Fexnor whispered. "They built this years before we even arrived." Another officer spoke up, panic in his voice. "If that wave reaches us..." "It will reach us in 6 hours," the science officer interrupted. "At its current speed and our current position, we have 6 hours before lethal radiation levels hit this fleet." "And our colonies?" Fexnor asked, though he already knew the answer. "The wave is spreading along multiple vectors. It will hit Kethros Prime in 3 weeks. The outer colonies in 4 to 6 weeks. Every major installation we have within 50 light years will be in the strike zone." The bridge fell silent. Every officer understood what this meant. The Kethran Imperium was about to lose most of its core territory. "We need to run," one officer finally said. "We need to get every ship away from Earth immediately." "To where?" Fexnor demanded. "The humans calculated escape routes too. Look at the projection." The science officer brought up a 3-dimensional map showing the radiation wave's projected path. It wasn't a simple sphere expanding from the sun. It was a complex web following logical routes, invasion corridors, supply lines. Every direction a fleet might reasonably flee was covered. "They funneled us," Thexnor said, with grudging admiration and absolute horror. "They made predictions about how we would invade, where we would position our forces, where we would run when threatened, and they built this weapon to hit all of those positions." "That level of prediction should be impossible," another officer protested. "They're humans," Thexnor said bitterly. "They're emotional, illogical, primitive. But they're also paranoid and spiteful. They planned for this. They planned for the day someone would come to conquer them, and they built a weapon that would destroy that conqueror, even if it meant their own extinction." "But Earth survived," the science officer noted. "The ejection was directed away from their planet. They protected themselves." "Of course they did," Thexnor said. "This wasn't a doomsday weapon. It was a revenge weapon. They built something that would let them survive while ensuring their enemies burned." He slammed his fist on the console. "Get me whoever is in charge on Earth, now." Minutes later, President Martinez's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired but satisfied. "War Marshal," Martinez said calmly, "I assume you've noticed our son's unusual activity." "What have you done?" Thexnor demanded. "We survived," Martinez said simply. "You gave us no choice. You came to our world, you burned our cities, you executed our leaders, you treated us like insects. So we showed you what insects do when you try to exterminate them. You've killed billions. You killed billions of us first," Martinez replied, "and you are planning to kill billions more slowly through slavery and cultural genocide. We just accelerated the timeline and changed the target. You cannot do this. This is against all laws of civilized warfare." Martinez laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Civilized? You hanged our generals like common criminals and broadcast it for entertainment. You mocked us as we died. Where was civilization then?" "I want to speak to whoever activated this weapon," Thexnor demanded. "No, I will find them. I will torture every human on this planet until—" "You have 6 hours before your fleet is vaporized," Martinez interrupted. "You don't have time to find anyone. And even if you did, the weapon is automated now. No one can stop it. That was the design. Once activated, it runs to completion. There must be a way to shut it down." "There isn't," Martinez said. "We made sure of that. We knew you would try to force us to stop it. So we built a weapon with no off switch." Thexnor's mind raced through possibilities. "We could destroy the devices controlling it. The quantum manipulators. There are over 10 million of them spread throughout the solar system," Martinez said. "Most are microscopic. You'd never find even a fraction in time. We could destroy your son. That would kill everyone, including you. And it wouldn't stop the radiation already released. We could destroy Earth. We could glass every inch of your planet in retaliation." Martinez met his eyes through the screen. "You could, and we expected you might. But then what? Your core worlds still burn. Your Imperium still collapses. You'd have your revenge, but you'd be destroyed anyway. Is that worth it?" Thexnor said nothing. He knew Martinez was right. "How?" Thexnor finally asked. "How did you build this? Your technology is centuries behind ours." "We had something you don't," Martinez said. "Fear. When we first detected your Imperium, we knew we couldn't win a conventional war. So we built an unconventional weapon. We spent decades on this project, our brightest minds working in secret, preparing for the day someone like you would come. This is madness." "This is survival," Martinez corrected. "You call us primitive, emotional, illogical. Maybe you're right. But we're also stubborn. We don't go quietly. We don't accept extinction. If we're going to die, we make sure our killers die with us." Thexnor wanted to argue, but alarms were blaring across his ship. The radiation levels were increasing faster than predicted. "We need to evacuate," his tactical officer said urgently. "To where?" Thexnor asked again. But he knew there was nowhere to go. The humans had planned too well. He looked back at Martinez. "I want to speak with Dr. Morrison, the scientist who built this." Martinez hesitated, then nodded. "I'll arrange it." An hour later, Morrison was brought to a secure communication room under heavy guard. The Kethrans couldn't reach him underground, but they could still communicate. He sat down in front of the screen and saw War Marshal Fexnor's face. "You did this," Fexnor said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Morrison admitted. "I led the team that designed Protocol Zero." "Why?" Morrison had expected anger, threats, demands. He hadn't expected that simple question. "Because 15 years ago, we detected your Imperium," Morrison said. "We listened to your broadcasts. We learned what you did to other species. Conquest, subjugation, cultural erasure. We knew you would come for us eventually. So you built a weapon." "We built insurance," Morrison corrected. "We hoped we'd never need it. We prayed for diplomacy, for peace, for any solution that didn't involve using Protocol Zero. But we weren't stupid. We knew hope wasn't a strategy." "This weapon will kill trillions," Fexnor said. "I know," Morrison said quietly. "I've done the calculations. Your core worlds, your colonies, your fleets, the death toll will be staggering. And you can live with that?" Morrison looked at the Ketran leader with tired eyes. "No. I'll never sleep peacefully again. I'll spend the rest of my life haunted by what I've done. But you know what? I can live with being haunted. I can't live with being extinct." "There are children on those worlds," Fexnor said. "Innocents who never voted for this war." "There were children on Earth too," Morrison replied, his voice hardening. "Billions of them. You burned their cities. You enslaved their parents. You executed their protectors while laughing. Where was your mercy then?" "I was following orders." "So was I," Morrison said. "The Emergency Command Council ordered this weapon built. They accepted that activating it would require all of them to die. They made that sacrifice, and now you're paying the price." Fexnor leaned forward. "If you were following orders, then you can choose to disobey. You can stop this." "I can't," Morrison said, "even if I wanted to. The protocol has no abort function. That was intentional. We knew you would try to force us to shut it down." "Then how do we survive?" Morrison almost pitied the War Marshal. "Almost. You don't. That's the point. You came to destroy us. You killed our leaders. You activated the one condition that triggers Protocol Zero. Now you face the consequence. This is genocide." "Yes," Morrison agreed. "Just like what you were planning for us was genocide. The difference is, ours is faster." The communication ended. Fexnor sat in his command chair, watching as his fleet began a desperate, futile evacuation attempt. In the hidden facility, Morrison watched the radiation waves spread across space. Tanaka stood beside him. "Do you really feel no guilt?" she asked quietly. "I feel all of it. Every death, every life ended. It's crushing me. But guilt is the price of survival, and I'm willing to pay it." The countdown had ended. Protocol Zero was complete. Now came the waiting. Waiting to see if their calculations were correct. Waiting to see if Earth would truly survive. Waiting to see if the Kethran Imperium would burn. Above them, the sun had returned to normal, but its work was done. 17 seconds had changed the galaxy forever. The radiation wave reached the Kethran fleet in 6 hours, exactly as predicted. Ships that couldn't jump to faster than light speed in time were bathed in lethal doses of solar radiation. Their shields held for minutes, then failed. Crews died screaming as their bodies broke down at the cellular level. War Marshal Fexnor managed to escape with 30% of his fleet. They jumped to a safe distance and watched their remaining ships die. The Eternal Judgment's medical bays overflowed with radiation victims. Even those who had escaped exposure would suffer long-term effects. "What are our losses?" Fexnor asked, though he already knew the answer would be catastrophic. His aide consulted a datapad with shaking hands. 70% of the occupation force. All of our supply depots within the solar system. Most of our support vessels. And our colonies? The radiation wave will reach Kethros Prime in 22 days. The outer colonies shortly after. We've sent warning messages, but there's no time for a full evacuation. The populations are too large. Most will die. Fexnor closed his eyes. His homeworld, his family, everyone he had ever known. Gone. How many total casualties are we projecting? Across all affected territories, 4 trillion, sir, possibly more. The radiation will contaminate water supplies, destroy crops, cause long-term genetic damage. Some worlds will be uninhabitable for centuries. 4 trillion. The number was too large to comprehend. Fexnor had led campaigns that killed millions, but this was something else entirely. This was the near-total destruction of his species. Pull all remaining forces back to defensive positions, he ordered. Abandon Earth. We can't hold it anymore. Sir, the Council will demand retaliation. They'll want Earth destroyed. Earth is the only human world. And they've just proven they'll take us all to hell with them if we try to destroy it. No. We leave Earth alone, forever. Within a day, the Kethran occupation ended. Ships lifted off from Earth's surface, leaving behind their equipment, their structures, their dead. They fled back toward their core territory, desperate to help their dying worlds. Humans emerged from hiding and watched the alien ships depart. In the streets of occupied cities, people cried with relief. It was over. Earth was free again. But the cost had been terrible. President Martinez addressed the survivors in a global broadcast. Today, the Kethran occupation has ended. Our world is free. But freedom came at a price we will carry forever. We survived by becoming the very thing we feared, destroyers of worlds. In Geneva, where the 17 generals had been executed, humans built a memorial. 17 pillars of black stone, each engraved with a name. General Sarah Chen. General Marcus Webb. General Park Min-jun. All 17 who had given their lives to activate Protocol Zero. Maria Santos stood before the memorial with thousands of others. She read the inscription at the base. The unwilling keys. They died hoping this day would never come. They died ensuring humanity would survive. She didn't know if they were heroes or monsters. Maybe they were both. Dr. Morrison emerged from his facility for the first time in weeks. He stood in the sunlight and felt like a stranger on his own world. President Martinez had arranged for him to broadcast a message to the galaxy, and Morrison knew what he had to say. The message was recorded in the ruins of the Palace of Nations, where the executions had taken place. Morrison stood where War Marshal Fexnor had stood, looking out at cameras that would transmit his words across known space. My name is Dr. James Morrison. I led the team that designed and activated Protocol Zero, the weapon that destroyed the Kethran Imperium. I want the galaxy to understand what happened here and why. He paused, gathering his thoughts. 15 years ago, humanity detected alien civilizations for the first time. We were excited. We dreamed of friendship, cooperation, learning from species older and wiser than us. But we also learned about the Kethran Imperium. We learned what they did to other worlds. Conquest, subjugation, cultural genocide. We hoped they would never come for us, but we prepared for the possibility. We built Protocol Zero as insurance, a weapon that could only be activated under one specific condition. If all 17 members of our military command council were killed while in enemy custody. We designed it that way deliberately. If our entire military leadership was captured and executed, it meant Earth had fallen. It meant we faced extinction. It meant we had no other options left. The Kethrans came 3 years ago. They demanded our surrender. They refused every offer of peace. They burned our cities and killed billions of our people. And when we finally surrendered to save what remained, they executed our leaders. They hanged them like criminals and broadcast it as entertainment. They laughed while our generals died. Morrison's voice grew harder. They thought that made them strong. They thought that showed their dominance. They were wrong. It activated Protocol Zero. It gave us nothing left to lose. I want to be clear about something. I am not proud of what I built. I am not proud of the trillions who died because of my weapon. I will carry that guilt until the day I die. But I want the galaxy to understand this. We didn't want this. We tried peace. We offered cooperation. We begged for mercy. You came with chains and mockery instead. Let this be humanity's warning to every civilization in the galaxy. We are a young species. We are primitive by your standards. But we learned one lesson from you. Survival matters more than morality. If we must choose between extinction and taking our enemies with us, we will choose mutual destruction every time. We didn't start this war, but we sure as hell finished it. The message broadcast across the galaxy. Reactions varied wildly. Some species were horrified. They called humanity monsters, genocidal maniacs who had committed an atrocity beyond comprehension. They demanded Earth be quarantined, isolated from galactic civilization forever. Others were quietly impressed. They had suffered under Kethran rule themselves. They had lost worlds to the Imperium's expansion. They didn't celebrate the death toll, but they understood the message. Humanity was not prey. And some species, the careful ones, the strategic ones, took note. Earth had been on the verge of extinction. They had lost their war. They had been occupied and enslaved. And somehow, they had still found a way to destroy their conquerors. That kind of spite was dangerous. That kind of determination was terrifying. In the months that followed, various alien governments reached out to Earth, not with threats or demands, but with careful, respectful communication. They wanted to establish diplomatic relations. They wanted trade agreements. They wanted to make sure Earth understood they meant no harm. President Martinez met with each delegation personally. He made humanity's position clear. We don't want to be your enemies, but we will never be your slaves. Treat us as equals, or leave us alone. Those are your only options. The galaxy grudgingly accepted. The Kethran Imperium had collapsed entirely. What remained of their species was too busy trying to survive on their irradiated worlds to threaten anyone. Other aggressive empires looked at Earth and reconsidered their expansion plans. Humanity had become something new in galactic politics. Not conquerors, not victims, but the species that had proven the ultimate deterrent. Make us choose between slavery and apocalypse, and we'll choose apocalypse every time. In a strange way, Protocol Zero brought peace, not the peace of friendship and cooperation that humanity had once dreamed of, but the peace of mutually assured destruction, the peace of fear. 1 year after Protocol Zero's activation, Morrison returned to Geneva. He stood before the memorial to the 17 generals and placed flowers at each pillar. "I'm sorry," he whispered to their names. "I'm sorry you had to die for this. I'm sorry I built something that made your deaths necessary. I'm sorry we live in a universe where weapons like Protocol Zero are the only thing keeping us alive." Sarah Chen's pillar stood in the center. Her inscription read, "Supreme Commander, United Earth Forces." She died warning them. They didn't listen. Morrison touched the cold stone. "You were right, General. They shouldn't have killed you all. But they did. And now they know the cost." Behind him, he heard footsteps. Maria Santos approached, carrying flowers of her own. She had become a spokesperson for the survivors. Someone who spoke for those who had lost everything in the war. "Do you regret it?" she asked Morrison. "Building that weapon?" Morrison thought carefully before answering. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret every life it took. But do I regret that humanity survived? No, I can't regret that. The aliens call us monsters now, Maria said. Let them, Morrison replied. Better to be feared as monsters than pitied as victims. They stood together in silence, looking at the 17 names. Heroes or monsters? Saviors or mass murderers? History would debate that question for centuries. But they had done what they set out to do. They had ensured humanity's survival. Across the galaxy, species that had never heard of Earth before now knew its name. They knew about Protocol Zero. They knew about the weapon that turned a sun into a gun. They knew about the generals who died to activate it. And they knew one other thing, more important than all the rest. Humanity would not go quietly. Years later, alien scholars studied what they called the Earth Paradox. How had such a primitive species created such a devastating weapon? How had they predicted Kethran invasion routes with such accuracy? How had they built quantum manipulators when their technology was supposedly centuries behind? The answer, they eventually concluded, was uniquely human. Where other species saw war as a test of strength, humans saw it as a test of spite. Where others calculated acceptable losses, humans calculated mutual destruction. Where others planned to win, humans planned to make sure nobody won. It wasn't logical. It wasn't rational. It was emotional, spiteful, and absolutely terrifying. And it worked. Earth began to rebuild. Cities rose from ashes. Populations recovered. Technology advanced as humans reversed engineered some of the equipment the Kethrans had left behind. But they never dismantled Protocol Zero. The quantum manipulators remained in place, hidden throughout the solar system. The system remained armed and ready, waiting for the day another species decided to test humanity's resolve. Morrison hoped that day would never come. But if it did, the galaxy now knew what would happen. They had been warned. Dr. Morrison spent his final years writing a detailed account of Protocol Zero's development. He wanted future generations to understand the choices that had been made, and why. He wanted them to grapple with the moral implications. He wanted them to be better than he had been. On his deathbed, surrounded by the few friends he had left, Morrison's last words were, "We survived. That has to count for something." Whether it did or not, history would decide. But humanity was still here to debate it. And in the end, that was what mattered. The memorial in Geneva became a pilgrimage site. People came from all over Earth to see it, to remember the 17 generals, to understand the price of freedom. The inscription at the base of the memorial was eventually expanded. Below the names of the generals, someone added a new line. They laughed as the generals were hanged. Then Earth activated Protocol Zero. Nobody laughs at us anymore. It wasn't a proud boast. It wasn't a threat. It was simply a statement of fact. Humanity had learned its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as survivors who refused to die quietly. And that, more than any weapon or any victory, was what made them truly dangerous. The sun rose over Earth, the same sun that had become a weapon. But today it was just a star again, warming the planet, giving life to the species that had turned it into a gun. Humanity looked up at that sun and remembered. They remembered what they had lost. They remembered what they had done. They remembered the price of survival. And they promised themselves, never again. Never again would they be unprepared. Never again would they be helpless. Never again would they face extinction without taking their enemies with them. It wasn't a perfect peace. It wasn't the future they had dreamed of when they first reached for the stars. But it was survival. And sometimes survival was enough. The galaxy had learned its lesson about humanity, and humanity had learned its lesson about the galaxy. In the cold math of survival, sometimes the only victory is making sure your defeat costs too much. Protocol Zero had proven that. 17 deaths had saved a species, and the galaxy would never forget.